There's something people around you often say, that you feel too much, that you delve too deeply when you don't need to, that you transform every experience into something bigger, heavier, more complicated than it should be, and that if you learned to let go, to stay on the surface of things, life would be easier. And for a while you tried. She tried to learn lightness. She tried to swallow the descents before they even began. She tried to behave like someone who doesn't carry so much, because carrying so much was exhausting, not just you. Also the people around you who didn't understand why a look, a word, the end of a conversation could take you to places that lasted for weeks, but it didn't work, and you know why. It's not weakness, it's not attachment, it's not drama, it's that there's a structure inside you that wasn't designed for the surface. Something that goes far beyond way of being or personality trait. An entire architecture, deep, precise, sometimes exhausting, that was built specifically to go where other people can't go. You were made for the bottom, and for Scorpio, the bottom isn't suffering. It's the only place where things truly happen. Think about it. Have you ever noticed people who go through enormous losses but remain on top of things? Who process things quickly, who move on without falling apart, who are fine in 3 months. They survive, but they don't change, not really. They come out on the other side practically the same as they were before. The experience passed them by without leaving a mark because they didn't go to the bottom where the mark is made. Scorpio doesn't have that option. When something comes to you, a loss, a betrayal, an ending that wasn't supposed to end that way, a beginning that hurts more than it should, it doesn't stay on the surface, it sinks. And you, no matter how hard you try to stop it, go down with it. You always do. Because it's down there that what needs to happen happens. It's down there that you rebuild yourself. The problem is that no one has ever explained it to you in this way. Nobody told you that the depths of your pain weren't a problem to be solved, that the intensity wasn't a flaw to be corrected, that specific pain, the one that doesn't go away with distractions, that reappears in the middle of the night when you let your guard down, that demands to be faced head-on, it had a purpose. It was building something inside you that couldn't be built any other way. And here I need to ask you a question that perhaps you've never asked yourself with this clarity. What if you weren't chosen to suffer? What if you were chosen to transform? The difference between the two things is enormous, and understanding that difference, that specific one, is what changes how you look at everything that has happened to you so far. Because there is a pattern in what you have experienced. It is not random. It is not bad luck. It is not cosmic punishment. It is a mechanism, precise, sometimes brutal, with an internal logic that only Scorpio was built to sustain until the end. Have you ever experienced moments when it seemed like everything was crumbling at once? Relationships, certainties, versions of yourself that you spent years building. And in the midst of it all, while trying to understand what was happening, a part of you, that quiet part, the one that observes from within, knew that it wasn't destroying you. I was letting you go, which is different. Destruction is the end. Undoing is the process. It's the way Scorpio knows better than any other sign, even if they never had the vocabulary to describe it. You were dismantled with surgical precision by the experiences that came your way. And then, without fanfare, without speeches, you were rebuilt, deeper, more real. With a type of knowledge that doesn't come from books or advice. It comes from going where few can go and coming back. And this process didn't happen just once, it happened several times. Each phase brought its own descent. Each descent, while it lasted, seemed like it would be the last thing before the end. And yet you are here, transformed, not intact, transformed. But there is still one question that remains unanswered. One that remains still like water before a whirlpool. Why you? Why was it built exactly like this? Why were you built this way? That's not a rhetorical question. It carries with it all the weight you've associated with your own intensity over the years. It was while searching for answers to this that I found this digital book, The Divine Path That Guides Your Zodiac Sign to a Life of Purpose. What surprised me wasn't what it says about Scorpio. It was how it invites you to look at what's already within you. Not as a self-help manual with ready-made formulas, as a tool for depth, one that helps those built to go deep, to finally understand what was being built during the descent, what the pressure was forming, what the silence was gestating. It doesn't treat your intensity as a flaw, It treats it as an architectural element, as a starting point, not a problem. You are now in a very specific state. Something I said awakened a recognition in you, not a new thought, but something you already knew in a way you couldn't yet put into words. This active recognition is rare, and it is precisely in this state that this content makes the most sense to access while you are present, while the connection is alive, not after the video, not when you are more certain. Now, the link is in the first pinned comment, but be aware, this content may be taken down. Click now and download your copy. And leave a comment. What was the hardest descent of your life? The one that, looking back at where you are today, you realize transformed you in a way that nothing easy could have. I really want to read about it. So, why you? It's not the kind of question with a clean answer, but it does have a true answer. And it begins with an image that I need you to visualize. There is a category of creatures that lives at the bottom of the ocean, not in the shallow waters where light still reaches. At the very bottom, that space where the pressure is so high that no other organism survives. These creatures aren't suffering from being there. They were specifically built for that pressure. Without it, they couldn't function. The pressure isn't their problem. It's the environment where they became extraordinary. That's what Scorpio is like. The emotional pressure that would destroy another sign. It doesn't destroy you, it activates you. It triggers mechanisms that only function under that specific load. And the only real problem is that for years you tried to pretend you could live in shallow waters, that you could be light in the same way that others are light. But light isn't its natural state. Deep is. And here's something I need you to pay close attention to. Scorpio's depth isn't just the ability to feel, it's the ability to see. You see what's hidden. You perceive what hasn't been said. You read the layers of a situation, a relationship, a person, layers that most people don't even know exist. And this gift, because it is a gift, even if it sometimes feels like a curse, was forged precisely by the processes you feared most. Each descent taught his eyes to see in the dark. And there's a cruel irony that liberates before it hurts. The very experiences you tried to overcome, process, leave behind, they are the source of what you see, of what you understand, of what you are capable of doing for yourself and for the people you love. You didn't go through these experiences despite who you are. You went through them because of who you are. Scorpio has a very specific cycle, one that repeats itself, not as punishment, but as a method. It goes like this. First comes the end of something, a phase, a relationship, a belief, a version of oneself. And this end arrives with a pain that seems disproportionate, because for Scorpio, no end is just an end. It's a complete undoing. It's like uprooting a plant. All the earth comes with it. Then comes the silence, that period when you shut yourself off. When people on the outside think you've recovered, and you internally are in the middle of something indescribable. You're digesting it, processing it in depths that still lack language, taking it apart and putting it back together piece by piece. And then comes what Scorpio rarely celebrates in themselves, emergence. You reappear, different, with a clarity that didn't exist before, with a firmness that couldn't be bought or taught, only earned, with an ability to endure what previously seemed impossible. This is your cycle, this is your method, and it wasn't an accident. Here's something Scorpio needs to hear very clearly. The life phases you identified as the worst, those in which everything fell apart, in which you didn't recognize yourself, in which the pain was bottomless, were also the ones that made you who you are now. Not despite them being difficult, precisely because they were difficult. You were taken apart, and what was put back together wasn't the same thing. It was more, it was deeper, truer, more capable. Every time, without exception. What happens is that Scorpio rarely stops to acknowledge this in themselves. They move on. They begin the next cycle. They accumulate depth without processing what that depth means, without understanding what has been built up within them during each of the descents. And it is precisely there, at this point of accumulation without integration, that the greatest paradox of Scorpio appears. You need control. You need to feel like you're in charge, that you can anticipate what's coming, that you can protect what matters, that you can ensure things don't spiral out of control in a way that catches you off guard again. And there's a very real reason for that. It's not weakness, It's not paranoia. It's that you've already lived through what happens when things fall apart. You know what's at stake. You know the weight of the bottom when you didn't choose to be there. So you're in control. It controls relationships, environments, narratives. It monitors signals. It reads situations with an attention that sometimes borders on exhaustion. It perceives inconsistencies that others don't even notice. And all of this works until the point where it no longer works. Because Scorpio's control comes at a cost they are slow to realize. It keeps you safe from outside things, but it can't protect you from internal things, from the transformation already underway, from the undoing that has already begun. A clenched fist that grips too tightly. It does protect, yes, but sometimes it crushes exactly what it was trying to protect. And the question that Scorpio has the most difficulty asking, the one he knows silently is the most important, is this: what would happen if I let go? That space between holding on and letting go, that's the most challenging territory there is for those built for control. And it's no small thing. The digital book Asterisk, The Divine Path That Guides Your Zodiac Sign to a Life of Purpose, Asterisk directly addresses this tension. It doesn't talk about letting go in the generic sense that self-help repeats ad nauseum. It delves into the specific logic of Scorpio, how you process what needs to be released and what takes its place when you finally let go. For those who have spent years maintaining control as a form of survival, this content is not advice. It's a precise mirror. The link is in the first pinned comment. The last copies are running out. Click now and begin your journey towards the clarity and genius you deserve. Scorpio lets go. Eventually, not by philosophical decision, out of necessity when the weight of what is being held exceeds the capacity to hold it. And that's where the transmutation begins. Alchemy is not magic. It never was. It's a precise process, specific temperature, specific time, specific conditions. Lead doesn't turn into gold because someone wished for it badly. It does because it was subjected to the right heat for the right amount of time in the right environment. There are no shortcuts. There's no accelerated version. There's no way to pretend the process happened when it didn't. Scorpio knows this process better than they realize. Each time you hit rock bottom, each descent, each unraveling, each silence, you were being subjected to exactly the temperature you needed. No more. No less. What seemed like excess was precision. What seemed like punishment was an alchemical process in progress. And what emerges afterward isn't an improved version of who you were. It's something different, something that didn't exist before. Not because the previous version died, it was incorporated, digested, transformed into fuel for what came after. You carry with you everything you've ever been, but you're no longer bound to any of those versions. This is transmutation. This is what Scorpio does when it stops resisting the process and lets the temperature do its work. There is something beautiful and terrifying at the same time in what lies on the other side of this process. The version of you that exists now, with everything you've lived through, everything you've survived, everything you've understood in the silence of the descents, wouldn't be possible any other way. There's no shortcut to who you've become. And there is no other sign that would become what Scorpio becomes through fire. What emerges after the fire in Scorpio is not merely resilience. It is wisdom of a kind that cannot be taught, only lived. The digital book Asterisk, The Divine Path That Guides Your Zodiac Sign to a Life of Purpose Asterisk was written for those who have already gone through transmutation or are in the midst of it and want to understand what to do with what remains, how to use what was built during the descents, how to transform the clarity gained into real direction, into concrete purpose, into a life that finally has the same weight and depth as what you carry inside. For Scorpio, this is not a motivational book. It's a map of what comes after the fire. The link is in the first pinned comment. The last copies are running out. Click now and begin your journey towards the clarity and genius you deserve. Now look back, not with judgment, not with regret. Look at how an architect looks at a project that became more complex than planned, but turned out exactly right in the end. Look at the phases you've gone through, at the versions of yourself you left behind, at the losses that, while they lasted, seemed like the definitive end, at the nights when there were no answers, at the days when you woke up heavier than when you went to sleep. Now look at who you are after all of this. Anyone familiar with mosaics knows one thing. Up close, a mosaic looks like just broken fragments, irregular pieces with no apparent pattern, no obvious beauty. But when you step back, when you gain distance, what was broken reveals an image that could never have been made any other way. The beauty of the mosaic depends on the fragments, not in spite of them. Your life has this format, and now that you're here, with this distance, with this perspective, for the first time it's possible to see what was being built all along. It wasn't random suffering, it was a process with direction, with purpose, with a logic that is only visible from here, from where you are now. You were chosen for this, not because the universe needed someone to suffer, but because it needed someone capable of going deep and coming back transformed, capable of carrying the weight without breaking, capable of seeing in the dark, capable of being reborn more than once within the same life. And now it all makes sense. Not the comfortable kind, the kind that retroactively removes pain. That kind doesn't exist, and you know that better than anyone. The meaning that transforms, the one that looks at what was hard and recognizes it was necessary. It was part of what made me capable. It was the price of a depth that no one can buy without paying with something real. This recognition, this moment of now I understand what has been built, is where many Scorpios stop. They contemplate, and they remain in contemplation. Scorpio is not a sign of lightness, it never has been. And it's not a sign of suffering either, even though for a long time it seemed that way. It's a sign of depth, of transformation, of a type of courage that has no name in common language, because it's the courage to go to the bottom, to endure the weight of the bottom, and to come back different, not just once, several times, as many times as necessary. And that capacity, that specific capacity to be disassembled and rebuilt without getting lost in the process, it's not suffering, it's power. It's the kind of power that can't be given, bought, or taught. It can only be earned by someone who has been where you've been. You were chosen for this, and now, looking at it from where you are, with everything you carry, with everything you've been through, with the clarity that the background has built within you, it all makes sense. Not in a way that removes the pain, in a way that transforms the pain into meaning. And meaning for Scorpio is the most powerful thing that exists. You think you know why Scorpio suffers so much? You've probably heard the explanations before, that it's because you feel too much, because you can't let things go, because you carry everything with an intensity that goes beyond reason. And maybe you've even repeated this about yourself, as if it were fate, as if it were simply the price of being born this way. But what if none of these explanations come close to what's really happening? What if everything you called suffering, every descent, every bottomless night, every version of yourself that had to be abandoned, had a precise logic, not in the generic sense of everything happens for a reason, in the structural, architectural sense that you were specifically built for this type of experience, and that these experiences built you back deeper, more real, with a kind of clarity that doesn't exist in those who remained on the surface.